J.K. Rowling's life is a classic rags to riches story. Her parents never received a college education, she lived for years with government assistance as a single mother, and overcame a dozen rejections from publishers to become, almost overnight, one of the most successful and widely read authors in the history of the world. After a couple of decades of Harry Potter, Rowling has turned the boy wizard into an entertainment franchise including books, movies, a play, a theme park, and more. Here's how the author found her path to success. Rowling was constantly writing and telling stories to her younger sister, Diane. Certainly the first story I ever wrote down, when I was 5 or 6, was about a rabbit called Rabbit, Rowling said in a 1998 interview. He got the measles and was visited by his friends, including a giant bee called Miss Bee. And ever since Rabbit and Miss Bee, I've wanted to be a writer, though I rarely told anyone so. When she was 9, Rowling moved near the Forest of Dean, which figures prominently in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and spent the rest of her childhood there. Her parents married when they were 20, and neither attended college. Her father was an aircraft engineer at Rolls-Royce and her mother was a high school science technician. I was convinced that the only thing I wanted to do, ever, was to write novels, Rowling said in her 2008 Harvard University commencement speech. However, my parents, both of whom came from impoverished backgrounds and neither of whom had been to college, took the view that my overactive imagination was an amusing personal quirk that would never pay a mortgage, or secure a pension. Rowling never had it as bad as Harry living with the Dursleys, but she described her teenage years as being filled with difficulty. I wasn't particularly happy. I think it's a dreadful time of life, she told The New Yorker. When Rowling was 15, her mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She died a decade later, before Rowling became a published author. Later on, one of her philanthropic projects was founding the Anne Rowling Regenerative Neurology Clinic at the University of Edinburgh with a gift of $16 million. The author studied French at the University of Exeter, graduating in 1986. According to her official biography, she read so widely outside her French and classics syllabus that she clocked up a fine of £50 for overdue books at the university library. Her classics knowledge was later used when she came up with the names for spells in the Harry Potter series. After graduating, Rowling worked at the research desk for Amnesty International, doing translation work. She found the work important. I read hastily scribbled letters smuggled out of totalitarian regimes by men and women who were risking imprisonment to inform the outside world of what was happening to them, she said, but it didn't suit her, as she said in a later interview. I am one of the most disorganized people in the world and, as I later proved, the worst secretary ever, she said. All I ever liked about working in offices was being able to type up stories on the computer when no one was looking. I was never paying much attention in meetings because I was usually scribbling bits of my latest stories in the margins of the pad, or choosing excellent names for the characters. On a delayed train from Manchester to London's King's Cross station, Rowling came up with the idea for Harry Potter. Over the next 5 years, she outlined the plots for 7 books in the series, writing in longhand and amassing scraps of notes written on different papers. Separately, she also started working on an adult novel that she never finished. The most traumatizing day of her life, Rowling said, was on New Year's Day in 1991, when her mother died, when Rowling was 25. Dad called me at 7 o'clock the next morning and I just knew what had happened before he spoke, she told The Telegraph in a 2006 interview. As I ran downstairs, I had that kind of white noise panic in my head but could not grasp the enormity of my mother having died. Barely a day goes by when I do not think of her. There would be so much to tell her, impossibly much. Fed up with secretary work, Rowling moved to Porto, Portugal, and taught English to students. There, she met and married Portuguese television journalist Jorge Arantes and had a child, Jessica, named after Jessica Mitford, one of her favorite authors, in July 1993. Rowling previously had a miscarriage, in 1992, according to The Scotsman. By November of 1993, the couple had separated. In Porto, Rowling started a book that was about a boy who found out he was a wizard and was sent off to wizard school. When she moved back to Britain, at the end of 1993, she had half a suitcase was full of papers covered with stories about Harry Potter. Without a job, Rowling visited different Edinburgh cafes and hunkered down to write her first novel on a typewriter. She often brought along Jessica, who slept in a pram next to her. During that period, Rowling lived off government welfare. I couldn't have written this book if I hadn't had a few years where I'd been really as poor as it's possible to go in the UK without being homeless, Rowling said in 2012. We were on welfare, what we call welfare, I would call benefits, for a couple years. The experience helped define her political activism later in life. She frequently criticizes politicians who attempt to cut back on government welfare programs. She's also talked about how the single mother label followed her throughout her career, and became the president of Gingerbread, a 100-year-old organization that supports single parents and their children. I was a single parent, and a single parent on benefits to boot. Patronage was almost as hard to bear as stigmatization. She wrote in an essay, I would say to any single parent currently feeling the weight of stereotype or stigmatization that I am prouder of my years as a single mother than of any other part of my life.